talk, I won't be perfect. But I want to tell you a little story about how this started. It had to be one of the snowiest, blowingest snowstorms I've ever seen in my life. And Denny and I and Troy went over to Indiana and picked up a brand new Caprice Classic station wagon from Connie Kuiper in the worst snowstorm I've ever seen. We got it back to my house, and they went home with the four-wheel drive, and the next morning I drove it through all the snowbanks over to Denny's house. And on the way we picked up, and Denny can help me, it was Denny and I, and Troy, and Mark, Tom, and John. On the way down 55, we must have seen at least 25 trucks jackknifed in the ditch. But you know, we all got our priorities straight because, if we were going to work that day, we'd have stayed home. But we were going down to look at steam engines. And that's kind of a priority. I'm just kind of I call these guys steamologists. I'm a deerologist. I collect John Deere tractors. Just kind of hang around with them. And we wound up down in Illinois City. No, not Illinois City. Springfield, Missouri is where we wound up. The nicest family you'd ever see. Hal was in a wheelchair, and Granny. And these are Cheryl's grandparents. And we went out to the shed and looked at the steam engines, and Denny thought, boy, that one looks awful nice. Had a pretty good home. That happened to be Hal's engine. That was Grandpa's engine. And Denny wound up striking a deal with Hal and bought it. And we were sitting in the living room, and Granny got us the best pie we ever had in a long time. And so we each had a piece of pie, and she asked everybody who was married. So all us guys that are married, we raised our hands, and Marky and Denny didn't raise their hand. And then Granny asked, how old are you guys? Granny's always thinking. So then Denny being a little shy, I told him, well, Denny's not married, and I think he was about 27, 28 at that time. And Granny says, I really ought to introduce her, Denny, to my granddaughter. And she's got a picture of you, Cheryl, on the wall, and you take a pretty good picture, so John and I kind of decided that we thought it'd be worth a letter. And so we kind of let it go that first time we were out there, and next time we went down, Denny and I went down with my truck and trailer, and we had to get stuff out, and then John and Mark came a little later, and Al came with the semi to get the engine. We were getting stuff out. And we wound up going to Hal's other farm about 25 miles away. And there wasn't enough room for Granny to ride in a car with everybody, so Granny asked me if I'd drive her pickup truck. So me and Granny, we tooled out across country, up and down the hills. How many hills was there, Denny? Up and down the hills. And all the way over there, Granny's asked me, what's wrong with Denny? How come he's not married? And at first I kind of thought she was just teasing, and I told her, I said, man, the guy's happy, just leave him alone. But then pretty soon Granny kind of said, well, how come Denny's not married? I said, he just didn't find the right one. Boy, that's Cheryl. She's really got to meet Denny. and Granny wouldn't leave me alone after a while, so I told Granny that if she got me an address, I would bug Denny till he wrote a letter. So that kind of worked, and I told her that she should work on Cheryl to see that Cheryl wrote a letter back. So Denny, with his good timing, guess what day Cheryl got the letter? April Fool's Day. And you know what? I think Denny got a letter back on what? The 3rd? It wasn't very long, was it, Cheryl? That pen was pretty hot that night. So then I think Cheryl wrote a letter back, and I think Denny wrote a letter back, and he gave her his telephone number. And I think Denny got a telephone call that weekend, didn't you?
He called me.
Did you? Okay, you sent your number back with the second letter, okay. And I know Denny went out there the first time, and they had a real good time together. And I think the next weekend, I think Denny went back out there, and I think maybe a couple weekends later, Cheryl came up here, and they've been going back and forth. And I know Cheryl's mom and dad knew that this guy was going to be around for a while. They could just tell it. So what about a little over 2 years later, it's today. I think it was around the first weeks in April when you went out the first time. So I had a little, and we don't have any drinks or anything, but John and I figured up a little bit of a toast. And if I can get it all out, it was, may your bunkers always be full. May your water glass never get empty. May you always have a head of steam. And may your only problems be deciding what to name the new engine.